Good day, and thank you for joining me for my Town Administrator's Report. I am Leon Gaumond, the Town Administrator for the Town of West Boylston, and I'm here today to talk about a number of things, mostly around the town meeting that's coming up. So today I'm going to speak about the articles that are going to appear at the town meeting in May, and I'm going to go in depth into the budget presentation so that the people of the town of West Boylston will know what is on tap for our May annual town meeting. The May town meeting is going to be held on May 18th, 2015, at the middle high school at 7 p.m. And we hope that you're all able to join us as we discuss very important matters that are facing the community. The articles for the town meeting are as follows, and you should also know that all of the explanation for some of these articles are all on the town's website. So if you go to the town administrator's blog on the town's website, you will see not only a copy of the budget, the revenues, the expenditures, but also the town meeting warrant explanation page as well. And if you look in your mail slot, when we send out the notice about the town meeting, I'm also for the first time going to include a handout which goes through all of the warrant articles and a brief explanation for each one. Let me start with Article 1. Article 1 is an authorization to hear the reports of the officers and the committee of the town. As you know, every year we start town meeting with a report from various boards and committees and departments that have business that they would like to report to the residents of the town. Under Article 2 is authorization to borrow in anticipation of revenue and to enter into a compensating balance agreement with a bank. This is an annual article that we do every single May, and it basically, as it describes in the title, it does allow us to borrow in anticipation of revenue. So for example, if we know that we're going to be getting a certain level of state aid and we build our budget around that, if we don't get the state aid in a timely manner, it will allow us to borrow in anticipation that we will be receiving those monies from the Commonwealth. Article 3 is an authorization to establish revolving funds. And these also need to be approved annually to operate any and all revolving funds within the town. This allows the community to raise revenues from a specific service and use those revenues without appropriation to support the service. For departments, the Mass General Law stipulates that each fund must be reauthorized each year at their annual town meeting. So that's why we bring forward this article every single May. And the law also specifies that there is a limit on the total amount that may be spent from each fund, and it must be established at that town meeting vote. It further explains that the aggregate of all the revolving funds in their entirety cannot exceed 10% of the amount raised by taxation from the town in the most recent fiscal year. So we're well below the threshold where that triggers a problem, but we just show that you know every year the town accountant does do that calculation to make sure that all the revolving funds fall within the guidelines that the Mass General Law specifies. It does say that wages and salaries for full-time employees can be paid for from the revolving funds, but only if the fund is charged for all the associated fringe benefits. That's not usually an occurrence here in West Boylston, but we are aware of that requirement as well. This year there is a new revolving fund that's being proposed under this article, and that is for the support of our ESCO project, or our performance contracting project. The receipts of this fund will come from the ESCO rebates. So when we made some changes to some of the heating systems and air conditioning systems in some of our town buildings, we are actually expecting to get a rebate as a result of those improvements. So those rebates are going to come back to the town in the tune of about $50,000 to $60,000. And I am looking to have them dedicated to this ESCO fund. ESCO revolving fund. And the reason why is so that we can then take some expenses for the ESCO project out of these rebates. So it's basically rebate monies from the ESCO project being used to further support the ESCO project. So the expenses of the revolving fund are going to be for the paying for the measurement and verification for the first couple of years. We're going to measure to make sure that we are getting the most bang for our buck in the $3 million improvements that we made to our municipal buildings. Any ancillary costs that go along with the project, but also the cost of some protective fencing around a new unit which has been installed right in front of the middle high school. So all of those things will be able to be covered under the rebates that we will receive through this revolving fund. Under Article 4 is authorization to expend funds in anticipation of reimbursement of state highway assistance. So as you may know and may have heard about Chapter 90, Chapter 90 funds are funds that come from the Commonwealth to the local cities and towns to be used on repairing roads and bridges and sidewalks and things like that. They promise us at the beginning of the fiscal year what we should expect to receive in revenues in the next fiscal year. This allows us to get that work started even though we don't have the money in hand. Article 5 is an authorization to amend the personnel bylaw and to review the classification and compensation plan so as to provide employees a cost of living pay increase. This is being asked for at 1.5%. Reason being, it is what I know that we can afford given the revenues that we have this year, and it does require town meeting to amend the wage and classification plan accordingly. Article 6 is to set the salary of all elected officials. Again, this is an annual article that happens every year. What it does is it requires a vote of the townspeople to set the salary for any elected official in town, with the exception of the town clerk, which is a full-time position. The elected officials who receive a wage of about $1. That's before taxes, not after taxes. And all the elected officials should be recognized for their commitment to have their salary set like that several years ago during the last economic downturn. Under Article 7, this is our annual budget fix article. It is produced every year at every town meeting to try to correct budget problems that exist in the current fiscal year. As you know, we live in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts we have town meeting form of government. So it's not an easy situation to fix a budget in a town in Massachusetts where you have town meeting form of government. You just can't move money from, say, the police line to the fire line if we are running a surplus in the police and we're running a deficit in the fire. That's not an easy thing to do. You actually need to go to the townspeople and ask permission at town meeting. So it does require the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee and department heads to be very thoughtful when they put together their budget in the first place. But remember, we put together our first drafts of the budget like 18 months before the end of the fiscal year that is governed by this fiscal budget. So things happen for the positive and things happen in the negative. And the budget fix article is our attempt to try to fix the budget so that we can get through the end of the fiscal year with no deficits in any one particular line item. We are still compiling the list of all the budget fixes that are going to be required, and shortly before town meeting, the town accountant and probably the interim town administrator will release the details of that budget fix publicly so that everyone will know ahead of time what is going to be voted on that night. Article 8 is an annual article that we put on for any prior year bills. Under Mass General Law, if we received a bill that needed to be paid in fiscal 14, for example, and we didn't encumber any funds at the end of the fiscal year to pay that bill, we don't have the authorization to pay that bill unless the townspeople give us authorization to do so. So we do have a couple of bills that are going to be prior year bills that will need to be addressed on town meeting floor. They're not very high cost items. They're in the 1,000 or so range. But it does require a 4/5 vote of the townspeople in order to pay those bills. Under Article 9 is our fiscal year 2016 sewer operating budget. As you know, we do have an enterprise fund. We do run a public utility through the town called the sewer fund. And that sewer fund basically pays for all the operations and maintenance of our sewer system. And we use the revenues from the sewer division to pay for the cost. The budget for the sewer department this year is proposed to be almost $1.7 million. Under Article 10, that is our fiscal 16 omnibus budget. It is our appropriation article. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I want to get through the rest of the articles before I start talking about the budget, because I'll spend a lot of time, obviously, talking about our $22 million operating budget. Under Article 11 is our authorization to appropriate funds from the community preservation revenues. Every year, we bring forward at least one article relative to the community preservation fund. And this year, the only articles that we're bringing forward relative to the CPA are the funds that are dedicated to support various aspects. We're actually not funding any projects in this year's operating budget. We're only appropriating funds. So this year, they will be presenting how much of our operating budget will end up going into affordable housing, historic preservation, or open space preservation. The remainder will go to, and administration, and the remainder will go to the undesignated section. No projects, just putting money aside into the various pockets as specified by law. Under Article 12 is an authorization to expend funds from our capital investment fund. So every year we bring forward articles that will fund any capital projects, any big ticket items that need to be funded, fire trucks, plows, those types of things that need to be purchased out of our capital investment fund. At this hour, when I'm giving this presentation, I don't have yet the report from the Capital Investment Board that tells me what they are going to be authorizing. But I expect that prior to town meeting, that the people of this town will hear a report from the Capital Investment Board as to which items they're proposing funding under our capital improvement plan. Under Article 13 is an annual article to appropriate to fund an elderly community services program. And this is the annual community senior work-off program that we fund every single year. Under Article 14 is a vote to appropriate $4,000 for the Parks Department. This is going to be used for fertilizing and in providing for insecticides and pesticides on the town fields as recommended by the Parks Commission. Under Article 15 is an appropriation article to fund an asbestos remediation program at the Public Safety Building. This article seeks to address a safety concern at the Public Safety Building where exposed asbestos has been identified and needs to be treated to remove any concerns. Under Article 16 is an appropriation article to fund heating and air conditioning improvements to the computer room in the new town hall. This article seeks to fund an improvement to the new town hall. The IT room should have a dedicated air conditioning system to prevent the room from getting too warm. Currently, it's connected to another set of rooms which is not working properly, so it needs to be corrected. Under Article 17 is an authorization to transfer funds for the cemetery sale of lots account. This article seeks permission to transfer $9,000 from the sale of lots account for the cost of a tractor and other costs associated with the maintenance of the cemeteries. Under Article 18 is an appropriation article to fund a consultant to study the Department of Public Works. This article will help the town meet one of the goals of the Board of Selectmen to conduct a critical examination of the Department of Public Works, both in their operations and in their funding, to improve the performance and functionality of the Department of Public Works. Under 19, Article 19 is to appropriate funds to eliminate the fiscal 15 snow and ice deficit. As you all know, the winter was particularly difficult and an expensive one to deal with this past year. The town is going to need to use stabilization funds to clean up any deficits in the snow and ice line before the next year's budget is finalized. The town will use any available funds under our budget fix article, which is Article 7, which is current year monies, to try to fix that line item deficit in snow and ice. But then we will likely and most certainly need to fund any and all further deficits out of the stabilization fund. And in my tenure here over the last 10 years, I can only recall one other time where we had to use the stabilization fund to help offset any snow and ice deficits. And that was the year we had the 2008 ice storm. It turned out that we did get some reimbursements from the federal and state emergency management agencies, but I don't know what we're going, at this minute, I don't know what we're going to be receiving as far as FEMA or MEMA reimbursements. So we do have this article here. Once we know, presumably by the time town meeting happens, what our deficit is going to be after backing out any reimbursements we may receive, we'll be prepared to move forward with a number to fix that deficit. The next two articles are Article 20 and 21, and they're both bylaw changes, and both of them involve proposals that are brought forward by our Chief of Police, Dennis Minnick. And Dennis actually joins me for this portion of the presentation here today. Let me start talking about Article 20, and then I'm going to ask Dennis if he could give us a little bit more information about this article. Article 20 is an authorization to amend Article 14 of the general bylaws, which is under licenses and permits, and it seeks to make some improvements to the general bylaws, which will strengthen the oversight of businesses who purchase gold and silver or other valuables, and these improvements, as I mentioned, are recommended by the police chief. So with me today is Chief Minnick.
Hi.
Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you think to bring this forward to the townspeople to amend the bylaws?
Sure. Basically, we have a bylaw in place, and that bylaw does not cover some of the items as specifically as we'd like to have them covered. So what may happen is if your house is broken into and someone steals jewelry from your jewelry box, it takes some time for us to do the investigation, and sometimes you might not even know it was stolen right away. So all this bylaw does is add some specific language to these shops to say that they have to keep the item for 30 days intact. And that gives us the time to take the victim around, show them pictures of the item so that they can't be destroyed. A lot of the shops will automatically buy that item, and then they melt it down, and it destroys not only the value but the sentimental value, and then there's no way to identify the item that was actually stolen. So this is just a simple verbiage change that tells the shop that they need to hold on to those objects for 30 days. And the way we verify that is they do audit sheets and they send them off to me either electronically or however, works out well. And then we can take a detective or someone around to a shop, take pictures of it or take them physically there and say, was this your grandmother's diamond ring that, you inherited? So that's a real simple fix that many, many towns have used to help us for an investigation.
So let me ask you, Chief, when you say these shops, you're talking about like pawn shops or gold and jewelry exchange businesses?
Like we have a few antique shops in town that not only do antiques, furniture, but they take in different jewelry items, earrings, necklaces. So that covers that specific amount of items that are taken into the shop. And we're not saying that the shop owner necessarily knows that that would be stolen,
right.
But it helps everybody. It helps the shop owner. They take a photo ID of who brought it in. It helps us track down who maybe break it in houses. And like I said, a lot of times it's more sentimental than it is valuable.
Good, thank you for that explanation. The other article that we're bringing forward as far as a bylaw change on town meeting floor is an authorization to amend the general bylaws by adding a new article which is called civil fingerprinting. And it adds a new section to the bylaws which addresses the use of fingerprinting by the police department. And again, this article was brought forward by the police chief. So, Chief, tell us a little bit about this. What made you think to bring this article forward for the town meeting?
What happened was when we criminally fingerprint someone that was, say, arrested for a crime, they're electronically taken, and the machine that we use is an electronic fingerprint machine. And when you get fingerprinted, that goes to the state and the FBI. And the system that we have now, it's illegal for us to fingerprint someone that isn't charged with a crime. So what this does is it enhances our ability to fingerprint someone. It sends it out just as if we were fingerprinting them for a criminal matter, but when it returns to us, we're the only ones that hold on to the information. So say you came in to request a vending license for an ice cream truck. You would agree, I would fingerprint you, it'd be sent off to the state and the FBI. They would, in return, give me a background check on you if you've ever been arrested and criminally charged with a crime, and then we could use that information to determine if you're a fit person to receive that license. So it enhances the public safety, but basically it's a law that is connected to a bylaw. We're not allowed to civilly fingerprint someone unless we have this bylaw.
So what are the other good reasons that you might want to have a civil fingerprinting bylaw? I heard that maybe for adoption purposes and
correct. There's a lot of things that people come in for, like if you're going for a job and say you're going for a job down in Florida, Florida will request that we fingerprint someone. Well, the only thing that we can do right now is we can take your prints, but they're not submitted to anybody.
I see.
So we can help that process. We can electronically send that to the state of Florida so that when you go for your interview, they get all the information they need. It can be used eventually for adoption purposes, because there's a whole background check on who's, the parents are who adopting a child. So it has a lot of good to it, and it helps us because we don't want someone out there holding a license that's issued by the town that is a criminal or someone that shouldn't hold that specific license.
Great. Well, thank you, Chief. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the explanation. So those are the only two bylaw changes that are being considered at the Maytown meeting. Both of those bylaw changes have been recommended for adoption by the Board of Selectmen. They are being reviewed by the Bylaws Committee, and presumably before town meeting, a report will be issued with a recommendation by the Bylaws Committee as to what action the townspeople are going to be asked to take on the night of town meeting. We have two last articles on the town meeting warrant. The first is an authorization to raise and appropriate funds to the stabilization fund, and the other is to raise and appropriate funds to the capital investment fund. As you probably know, after my years of being the town administrator here, I have always tried to include these two articles on every town